Beneath the scarred landscape of Vimy Ridge, in these darkened tunnels, thousands of young Canadian soldiers prepare for battle. The night before Canada's greatest victory, they leave their mark in the soft chalk walls. For many, it will be their epitaph. From the height of the plateau, 150 kilometers from Paris, the Germans can see the entire region. The 4 Canadian divisions are ordered to take the ridge. A surprise attack is almost impossible. The slaughter at the Somme is still on General Arthur Currie's mind. Strategies must be completely revamped. A model of Vimy Ridge is set up. The troops measure and time the planned advance. And maps are issued to all the soldiers for the first time. Currie, commander of the 1st Canadian Division, writes to his mother.
Personally, I was never better. My hair is thinner and whiter, but otherwise I am all right. The division is in splendid form. I have never had more confidence in its fighting efficiency.
Claude Williams is the 21-year-old son of a Methodist minister from Hamilton, Ontario. He abandoned his medical studies to join the army.
Dear Father, if old Kaiser Bill only saw the preparations that have been made, he would throw up the sponge, I'm sure.
Vimy Ridge is covered with German trenches, shelters, and tunnels protected by barbed wire and machine guns. But the Canadians build an elaborate system of caves and tunnels of their own. They set up a railway to transport a massive amount of explosives. Claude Williams awaits 0 hour.
The attack was at daybreak. We had to lie in the open trenches all the night. The morning turned out gray, cold, and drizzling. Everybody shivering and chilled to the bone.
On April 9th, 1917, Canon Frederick Scott rises at 0400 hours.
Never was the spirit of comradeship higher in the Canadian Corps. Never was there a greater sense of unity.
There is no visual record of Vimy Ridge. Scenes from other battles help tell the story. The attack begins at 0530.
At the arranged time, to the absolute second, suddenly as dawn was breaking, every gun on the whole front opened up. The roar of the heavy guns was deafening.
A creeping barrage leads the attack, destroying enemy barbed wire. The infantry marches behind, doing the Vimy Glide, a 100-yard advance every 3 minutes, protected by a curtain of artillery fire. Canon Scott watches as the 4 Canadian divisions fight together for the very first time.
I knelt on the ground and prayed to the God of battles to guard our noblemen in that awful line of death and destruction and to give them victory. And I'm not ashamed to confess that it was with the greatest of difficulty I kept back my tears.
It is at Vimy Ridge that Mike Mountain Horse undergoes his baptism of fire.
Where is the God that the white man has taught the Indian to believe in? Why does he allow this terrible destruction? I pray that he might yet bring the nations to their senses.
Shoulder to shoulder, the men advance up the ridge as planned, routing the Germans from their trenches. The Canadian troops take and hold Vimy Ridge. Canadian soldiers make greater advances and capture more arms and more prisoners than any other Allied offensive since the start of the war. General Arthur Currie is elated.
A wonderful success. Every line was captured on time, every battalion doing equally well. The grandest day the Corps has ever had. The sight was awful and wonderful.
It is often said that the Battle of Vimy Ridge marks the true beginning of the Canadian nation. Vimy becomes a shared symbol for Canadians and a source of national identity and pride.
Dear Aunt Winnie, how is the baby? Daddy is very busy. I should tell you some news from the family. Mother and Carmen are dead. Daddy and I are safe.
Missing, Donald Cameron. Answers to Donnie. 4.5 years, fair hair, dark eyes. Wore red sweater or nightgown. Father anxious.
Richmond School, 84 dead. Annie MacDonald, George McClellan, Archie Orr, Catherine Pattison, Lizzie Taylor, Irene Travis, Gertrude Williams,
The people of Halifax are well acquainted with the war. Soldiers leave from their port. Soldiers return, wounded and worn. But on the morning of December 6, 1917, the war deals them a direct and deadly blow. The Norwegian freighter Imo is leaving the port, carrying much-needed supplies to the Belgian Relief Fund. The Mont Blanc, a French vessel, is arriving from New York to join a Canadian convoy set to cross the Atlantic. In order to avoid another vessel, the two ships find themselves in the same lane. At 8:45 a.m., the Imo hits the Mont Blanc. Thirteen-year-old James Pattison knows from the din in the harbor that this day will be like no other.
I was walking to Richmond School with my two brothers. Gordon was ahead of me, and my younger brother was right behind me. Catherine was homesick. The fire engines passed. Of course, we didn't know it was on fire. All we could hear was the alarms going, and the fire engines.
Other curious onlookers come to see the accident. And in schools, factories, and offices, everyone watches from the windows. No one knows that the Mont Blanc is carrying 3,000 tons of munitions and explosives.
didn't hear the explosion. We felt the concussion. Knocked us unconscious. It did come into my mind. Is this the end of the world? You couldn't hear a sound. Then things cleared off a little and you could hear noises. People screaming, and of course, you could hear the places burning.
The force of the explosion sets off the bells in all of the church steeples. The bells will toll for months as the people of Halifax bury their dead. James Pattison loses half of his family. His little brother Alan dies on the way to school. His 10-year-old sister Catherine is killed instantly at home. It is 4 months before his father Vincent's body is pulled from the wreckage of the sugar refinery where he worked. Over 6 square kilometers of Halifax are destroyed. The explosion kills 2,000 people and another 9,000 are wounded. The next day, the city is swept by a massive snowstorm, slowing the critical relief efforts. Many of the wounded are blinded, their eyes torn by shards of flying glass. A large number of children are orphaned. Lambert Griffith is a sailor from Red Deer, Alberta, and is aboard the Niobe, a Canadian warship stationed in the port. 2 days after the explosion, he scribbles a note to his wife.
Hundreds were killed in their houses miles away, even poor little children in their schools. There is to be a big funeral tomorrow, about 100 unidentified bodies to be buried. Thank God 100 times that you and the dear little girls were not here.
The tragedy happens 3 weeks before Christmas.
There will be no Christmas here, as it is a city of sorrow. Poor children without parents. We will get no leave. Do what you can, my old love.
The Halifax explosion is the most devastating disaster on Canadian soil, and the biggest man-made explosion in history. Until Hiroshima. The war that is devastating Europe threatens to tear Canada apart. And when the killing fields fall silent, Canada will not know peace. A plague will claim thousands of lives. Canadians will cry for reform and revolution. But this will soon become a decade of new ideas, new inventions, and unparalleled wealth. A boom some think will never end.